From a UFC legend left scarred for life, to the career-ending injury of a rugby favorite, these are the most horrific sporting injuries of all time. There's no doubt about it that sporting comes with its injuries. While sports like golf and tennis are usually pretty safe, contact sports like football, basketball, and rugby can put players in compromising positions and often lead to some nasty injuries. But when it comes to horrifying sporting injuries, MMA takes home the medal for the nastiest of the bunch. Mixed martial arts sees some of the best fighters in the world step into a cage and duke it out. But they don't just use their fists like in boxing. They also kick, knee, elbow, and grapple each other into all the locks and submissions you could imagine. And this is why MMA is home to some of the most stomach-turning injuries in sports history. The Ultimate Fighting Championship, aka the UFC, is the biggest organization in the MMA world. It's been home to some of the most brutal battles that MMA has ever seen. And with those brutal battles, often come some brutal injuries. While nasty injuries can take place amongst all weight classes, some of the nastiest fights have happened in the heavyweight class. These men are huge specimens with brute power and iron fists. The damage they can do is unbelievable. Alistair Overeem shot to fame in the fighting world after a string of impressive victories within Pride FC. He quickly gained notoriety as one of the most dangerous strikers in the heavyweight division, and it wasn't long until UFC president Dana White signed him with the UFC. Overeem utilized his brute knockout power to gather himself a string of TKOs in the UFC. But his lucky streak ended, and he caught a nasty hook himself. When taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik at UFC on ESPN 7, Overeem suffered one of the most horrific-looking injuries the UFC has ever seen. After a back-and-forth fight, Rozenstruik rallied to knock Overeem out with 4 seconds left in the final round, and in the process, he completely shattered Overeem's lip into a million pieces. The cut was so bad that it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. His lip had completely come apart and split right the way up to his nostril, an injury that has left him walking around with a nasty scar to this day. And if you think that's bad, well, these next UFC injuries will have you sick to your stomach. In an MMA bout, leg kicks are a great way to score points with the judges and pick away at your opponent. But every now and then, these leg kicks go very wrong. At UFC 168, striking specialist Anderson Silva took on Chris Weidman in the octagon to regain his middleweight championship belt. But it did not go as planned. Anderson picked away at Weidman throughout the bout, utilizing his powerful legs and dishing out some ruthless kicks. However, one of these kicks would end the fight and cause Silva to suffer a devastating loss. When throwing a leg kick, Weidman checked it and their shins collided. Silva's leg completely snapped and the flesh wrapped around Weidman's leg. It was truly one of the most shocking moments in UFC history. And if you can bring yourself to watch it, the slow-motion play-by-play is utterly horrifying. Ironically, in a bizarre twist of fate, Weidman suffered the same injury years later at UFC 261, and it happened in the exact same way. Other notable stars to suffer this same injury include Conor McGregor and Jack Becker. So it just goes to show how often this type of injury actually happens. Perhaps fighters should try to wear their opponents down with body kicks instead. Leg kicks just seem way too risky. While boxing is considered a much safer fighting sport, gruesome injuries do still happen. However, it is usually the result of one of the fighters fighting dirty. We've all heard of Mike Tyson's notorious biting of Evander Holyfield's ear. It is easily one of the most infamous moments in boxing history. This was the second time the two fighters had met in the ring, and an intense hatred for one another had well and truly been ignited. But nobody expected Tyson to fight so dirty. He literally bit Holyfield's earlobe clean off and spat it out on the floor like it was nothing. But Holyfield is no angel either. In 2002, the aging former champion Holyfield duked it out with Hasim Rahman. After being on the receiving end of a nasty headbutt early in the bout, Rahman's head began to swell at an alarming rate. Holyfield used this to his advantage and proceeded to target the area. But by the 8th round, the fight was stopped when the lump on Rahman's head grew to the size of a tennis ball. It was truly hideous to look at and remains one of boxing's most shocking moments. While many might say an injury in fighting isn't so shocking given the nature of the sport, you could say the same for professional football. The National Football League is a dangerous sport due to the high levels of contact and physicality involved in each play. The players are massive and they move quickly, creating an environment where injuries not only occur often, but can also be severe when they do. Players are bigger and stronger than ever before, so even routine tackles or blocks can cause serious damage to the body. In 2008, Minnesota Vikings cornerback Charles Gordon was whisked off the field in the second quarter against Green Bay after a tackle at the end of a punt return left him with a gruesome ankle injury. The slow-motion replay shows Gordon go down and completely twist his leg in the opposite direction that it should go. This resulted in a horrific break, and his ankle completely snapped. And this isn't the first time this type of injury has happened. Leg breaks are a common injury in the NFL with devastating consequences. The most famous example of this is Joe Theismann's career-ending broken leg in 1985 due to a tackle from Lawrence Taylor. Joe Theismann's career-ending broken leg in 1985 was one of the most iconic NFL injuries of all time. On November 18, 1985, during a Monday night game against the New York Giants, Theismann attempted to pass and was sacked by Lawrence Taylor. As he fell to the ground, his right leg bent backwards in an alarming fashion, causing a compound fracture of both the tibia and fibula bones. It was an injury from which he would never recover. Theismann's gruesome leg break is still replayed on television today, remaining as a powerful reminder that even the most seemingly invincible NFL players can suffer serious injuries in an instant. Other notable players who have suffered serious leg fractures include Alex Smith, Carson Wentz, and Marcus Lattimore. These injuries usually occur when a player experiences an awkward landing, collision with another player, or when their leg gets caught in the turf. While some players are able to return from serious leg fractures, many never make it back to the NFL after suffering such an injury. It is a cruel reminder of just how dangerous this sport can be and serves as a cautionary tale for all athletes. Another sport where these types of injuries is common is rugby. Rugby is often compared to American football, and while they are similar, they bear some striking differences. But it's fair to say they are both as lethal and dangerous as each other. Rugby is an intense and extremely physical sport that has seen some devastating injuries over the years. One of the most notorious examples was when former England player Steve Thompson was left with a career-ending neck injury in 2004 after being tackled by two opponents simultaneously. It was an injury that shook the world of rugby and still resonates to this day. Other common rugby injuries include fractures, head trauma, and ligament damage. A survey from 2018 found that nearly half of all professional rugby players reported a major injury, with 22% of those out for more than 6 months. So it's fair to say that any sport can come with its injuries, and this is why athletes prime themselves to be as strong and fit as they can be. So, from a UFC legend left scarred for life, to the career-ending injury of a rugby favorite, these were the most horrific sporting injuries of all time.